Hey everybody, how's it going? Alex here, and today we have something very special. I decided that it's time to do a quick introduction to Airtable. We've done a bunch of videos in the past that are quite advanced, and I think it's time to share a little bit of the philosophy and the knowledge behind the design, or rather the best practices that I tend to follow when developing my Airtable projects. So join me. Let's get started. All right, so here we are. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and sign in first and foremost. So now that we've signed in, let's go ahead and create a new base. Down here, let's just press add a base. Now, my eyes are sort of sensitive to color because I spend quite a lot of time in front of computer all day long. So the first thing that I tend to usually do is to make the color black, at least in the panel up here. You can choose whatever color you like from this little drop down over here. Now, don't want to get too much into the detail of what every single field does or what we're seeing. I want us to get to start to build stuff, and we will find out as we go about the various elements and the various fields. I don't want this video to be an encyclopedia, but rather something like more of a cook along where we can learn by doing. So, okay, this is the first thing we see. As you understand, the next thing to do is probably give this thing a name. I'm just gonna call this Real Estate DB version 1, and I have my tables up here. Right now we only have one. Yep, I think I'm just gonna call this first table properties. Now, I'm going to assume that I'm a real estate agent. Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a bunch of them in the past, but essentially I'm going to put myself through the paces of creating a professional real estate management database, as if I was a real estate agent with my skill level of Airtable. And I'm going to take you with me through this journey. So the next thing to do, let's just add a couple of properties. House 1, house 2, house 3. Now, the first tip that I would give at this point is to try and start with as little demo dummy information as possible. Whenever you're creating something like this from scratch, it's good to have a very clear head and also to force yourself to think critically. Now, this is my list of properties, right? I have my 3 houses. I need to ask myself the question, what are some of the fields that would typically come as part of the biographical information of a property? First thing that comes to mind is the address. And the next thing to kind of point out is that if you want to create a new field, the best thing to do is just press plus over here where you can add a new field. Or you can right click on an existing field and just say duplicate. In my case, I'm just going to create a new field, address. And I'm just going to call this a long text because I want my address to be in one field. Probably we need to break this down a little bit later, but for now, address. I want to keep things extremely simple. House, address, yeah, it could be as easy as that. And then we can add a few more biographical fields like value, or let's call this market value. And for this field type, I'm going to choose currency. We're going to assume that we're in the United States, so the currency symbol is the dollar. House, address, market value, size, or let's call this lot size. And this can be basic number, right? So number, and we can go by integers. One thing I want you to notice is that whenever I'm editing a field, there's always the options to have formatting for any kind of field, pretty much. Maybe with 1 or 2 exceptions, but usually you have formatting abilities for any kind of field. From here, I can just press create field, And that is as easy as it gets. My next thing could be contacts, right? So as a real estate agent, I have contacts, buyers, sellers who participate in deals, contacts. At this point, I want you to understand that probably one of the key principles in having a successful Airtable structure and architecture is to differentiate between your, what I like to call dry lists of things, my list of houses, my lists of contacts, that typically they're just like a single entity, essentially, and differentiate between what I like to call well, I mean, it's not like I like to call it, it's a technical term that you may have heard being thrown around, called junction tables. A junction table is essentially when you take two dry lists of things, properties and contacts, and you link them together via linked fields. We're going to see this in action shortly. And that creates a junction table. In other words, it creates a marriage. Now, this marriage can be comprised of at least two linked fields, one field, one value in each field, typically, and more. You can create a junction table with 3 linked fields. So essentially, those marriages create a unique entity, which is really a blend of other unique entities. So yeah, contacts. Let's talk about contacts. What do we have for contacts? I'm going to force myself to think clearly. I'm going to delete all my fields and just leave my leftmost field. And yeah, I'm just going to create my list of contacts. Let's go with John Doe, Mary Doe, Mike Doe. Cool. Okay, contacts. What else do we know about humans? Typically, we know their email, we know their phone, we know their date of birth. And here I'm going to choose the field type of date. And you can, of course, play around with the inclusion of time, the inclusion of a time zone, and of course the date format that you prefer. For now, I'm just going to use the US version. Date of birth. Simple as that, right? Let's just fill those in. I'm just going to add some very quick info here. Okay, so we've added a little bit of information to our database. So now let's discuss our first junction table, the deal. In real estate, when there's a deal, there's always a buyer, a seller, and of course a property, right? Let's go ahead and create a new table. Let's call it deals. And again, I'm going to force myself to think clearly. Think one field at a time. I'm going to first I'm going to create a new field, calling it property. And now I'm going to link to another record. Click on this, and then click on properties. Now, as I was saying before, because this is a junction table, we typically want one of each of our dry list items to be used. So I'm going to disable the allow linking to multiple records because this is going to prevent me from making mistakes. Create field. Next, I'm going to create yet another linked record field. I'm going to call this seller, and this is going to link to contacts. Allow linking to multiple records? No, there's only one seller. Create a field. At this point, now that we've created 2 linked fields, I want to draw your attention to something. So I want to draw your attention to how Airtable at this point has created backward links on its own automatically. We created a linked record, which, if you want to think about it, linked records are almost like little tunnels that create a tunnel from one place, from one table to the other. So in this case, we created property. So if I go to my properties table, you can now instantly see that there is a new field that appeared out of nowhere called deals. And that is because we created a link from from deals to properties. And when you are looking at a property, you can instantly see what deals it's been a part of. The same thing has happened with contacts. You see how we created the seller field here that links into contacts? Well, guess what? Now there is a deals field in contacts. At this point, I have to warn you, knowing this, I usually, once I create the one end of a linked record, I always go into the other end without wasting any time. And especially in this case, I have to say that this is seller in deals and then like a colon, and just add a colon there, because essentially this field will always reflect that John Doe was a seller in such deals. And now that I will create the buyer link to another record, contacts, disable linking to multiple records. There we go. Now you'll see how there is another field called deals. So if I wouldn't have changed this, I would have had deals and deals, which is weird. And it's important to know this little detail that as soon as you create a linked record in one place, it will link back to the other. A lot of people do this mistake of creating a lot of links, but then they seem surprised of finding these other fields created in other places, and they are named weirdly because it would be named like deal and deal 2. Yeah, it's important to know this detail. Always go ahead and check that other end where you've created that field. Make sure that it's named well and that you understand what this is. So here I'm gonna rename this to buyer in deals. Excellent. At this point, we're now going to start to elaborate more on the construction of deals, and we're going to take a look at how to create formulas and things like that. Let's take a look at that. Great. So now that we're back, let's elaborate more on the deal. This is where I'm going to introduce a few more slightly advanced topics in regards to Airtable. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring the property market value into the deal. And I'm going to clean up my database a little bit further. I'm just going to delete these blank records. And I'm going to jump into my properties list, and I'm just going to add a fake address here. So 123 Market Road, CA, and just now market value. Let's just say that the market value of this house is $500,000. Lot size doesn't really matter at this point. What I want to showcase is a little bit of typical math that we usually do, just some calculations and how we go about doing them. So the first thing, I want to introduce you to the concept of lookup fields. So let's create a field, and in this case, I think because we're dealing with lookups, it's probably a little bit easier to do this a slightly different way than we've done so far. And this is to right click on the lookup field, on the field that you want to look up fields from. Remember when we said that linked fields act like tunnels? Well, here's one of the reasons why they are so good. Because you've developed this tunnel, now you can bring stuff from the other side into this table. So I can bring fields from properties into deals. And I can do that by right clicking on property, add lookup fields. And I want to bring the market value in here. So let's link up a property. And I'm going to choose house 1. And you see how it has brought up the market value of that house. And I'm just going to move it slightly to the side. Also, I'm going to expand it and I'm just going to remove the from property. We know that this is from property. Excellent. Now, because we're dealing with real estate, the cents don't really matter. So I'm going to go into my formatting over here, and I'm going to change my precision to just go to the dollar, basically, and save that. So 500,000. One thing that I want to show you is the market value. So one other thing that I want to show you is that because this is a lookup, it will change, right? So it will change. If I change the market value here for that property to 550,000, it will change here. Now, you don't want necessarily, because you might be doing deals, multiple deals on the same property, you may not want to have on every single one of your deals all the historical data to change, right? So let's say the market value changes to 565,000. You don't want that to change everywhere, do you? No. So there has to be a way where we can snapshot that market value as part of that deal. And this is very easy to do. So I'm just going to clear all these extra records. This is where we are introduced to our first little automation. So let's go ahead and prep for that automation. And to prep, I'm going to create a new field called market value at time of deal. And this is just going to be a currency field. Again, my precision should be just to the dollar. Create field. I'm going to now jump into my automations over here, right here in this tab. And I'm going to set a trigger. Right now we're working on automation 1, and I always suggest that you edit the name of this. So I can call this something like pre-fill current market value into deal, something like that. There it is. As a trigger, and again, just because we're dealing with automations, there has to be some kind of trigger. There has to be an event that happens that begins the process of this automation, aka trigger. So add a trigger, and I want this to be when the record matches conditions, although there are many others that you can choose from. But the one that I personally use most often, I think maybe 90% of the time, is when the record matches conditions. Use that, and then the next thing that we need to do is choose the table. So in my deals, and then the conditions are as follows. I want to say that when market value, which is a lookup field, right, is non-empty and market value at time of deal is empty, and to proceed to the next step, the action, because we want that value from here to be pasted there, we need to first choose a record and choose that record, and then we can set up our next action. So add advanced logic or action. I want to use update record. Of course, there's loads of other actions that you can take, but for now, update record. And here I'm going to choose again, deals. Now I have to supply the ID of the record that I want to update. So I'm going to press this blue button here and choose the first field, which is called Airtable record ID. It's always going to be first, shouldn't miss it. Once I've done that, now I can choose a field that I want to update. Choose a field, market value at the time of deal, and you may notice that the blue button doesn't exist anymore. Don't worry, just press on this little cog and choose dynamic. Now the blue button is back again. We can just choose market value, and you see there's a little arrow. Hit that and just choose the value. Now we can generate a quick preview of this. And you can see that the market value at the time of deal would have been updated. You know this because it's slightly highlighted in green with 565,000. Close that window for now. Let's just turn this thing on. Data. In order to see this in action, I have to trigger it. Right now, when you turn on an automation, it will never run retrospectively. It will not process. As soon as you turn it on, it will not process any records from the past. It will only process records that are being triggered from that moment onwards. So let's delete the link to the property so our market value gets removed. Let's link the property again, and excellent. You can see instantly that market value has been copy pasted. This market value I can actually change, and essentially it's a way to save and store the market value at the time of the deal. Let's take a look at how to calculate commission from the potential sale price or property. So now let's go ahead and create a sale price field, currency, edit my precision, and create field. Now, the sale price ideally should be by default slightly higher or lower than the market value. But for the moment, I think it's an interesting notion to just copy paste the market value, both in the market value of time of deal and into the sale price. So let's go add this to our automation, update record, and I'm just gonna add the sale price to my list of fields that gets updated. I'm gonna press here, dynamic as we did before, sale price, and I'm going to choose market value and the market value just like I did before. Don't forget to update this automation. Press update. Let's go back and let's trigger this again, see what happens. Property, house. Now you see it did not trigger because I still have my market value at the time of deal pre-filled. So let's clear this. And now you see how we've cleared it. And because the system saw that we had this filled in and this wasn't filled in, that it acted as a trigger. So that's how triggers inevitably work or tend to work. It's not just by creating a record and linking a house, which will also now trigger that automation. It's also sometimes by erasing fields, field values in existing records that trigger automations. So now we have looked at lookup fields, linked fields. Now I think it's time to take a look a little bit into how calculations and formulas work. So let's begin. So now let's take a look at how to calculate commissions. I'm going to create a commission field. This is going to be a % field, and I'm going to add a default, which is going to be 2.5%, so that every single time there's a new record, Airtable will automatically print 2.5%. And the precision will be like so. Create field. So if I create a new record, now you can instantly see how 2.50 is being pre-filled. Delete that record. Let's say 2.50. The next thing to do is to create a formula that calculates what is the 2.5% of the sales price. Let's call this commission value. And we need to find the formula type field, formula, choose that, and then multiply sale price. And to find the right field, you can start just by typing the name. Airtable should suggest the fields that are available down here. If you want to choose one of those fields, simply click on that suggestion. You could also manually type this. Open up a pair of curly brackets and start typing the exact name of that field. So sale space price. And you'll see that you've done a good job as soon as the field turns from black to purple, like so, times the commission. So I can start typing com, and I can choose that field, create field. The commission value for this sales price, if the commission was 2.5%, would be $14,125. Let's format this because this doesn't look quite nice. So let's jump in, double click, formatting, format, currency, and again, just up to the dollar, and save. Excellent. Let's test it. let's say the commission was 3%. And you can see instantly how the commission value gets calculated. Let's move on. Let's take a look at a few final bits of automation, and that is the task list for a deal, which is a very typical requirement for a lot of real estate agents, and across the board when you're working with Airtable, it's good to know how to deal with tasks that get generated or should get generated for and by various entities. So now let's go ahead and build this automation that automatically adds deal tasks based on the deal status. To start, let's go back to our automations. I'm just going to put myself down here, press create automation, and now our trigger is again going to be when the record matches conditions, and the conditions are, of course, when the deal status is pre-sale, choose a record. Perfect. Then at that point, we need to first find some records. We need to find the blueprint tasks for that particular status. So let's go ahead and choose that. Next, we need to choose our table. Where is it? In task blueprints, of course, and find records based on a condition. And the condition is that the status is pre-sale. Again, reminding you, this is the task blueprint, right? This is where we set up the blueprints for our statuses. This is then that choice. Next, hit advanced logic or action, and then repeating group. Repeat for each in no list selected. So let's select input list, and this is find records. Just click here, and then use as list. Excellent. Now, for each one of those records, we need to create our deal tasks. Add action, create a record. This time we're creating it in deal tasks. And the fields that we're gonna map are super simple. The deals, press the blue button, and here we need to map the deal. We need to choose a different source rather than from this current item, because right now Airtable considers you being in the list. So you need to choose this when a record matches conditions, which is this first step. So from this first step, we need to click here and get the Airtable record ID of our deal, right? Then next thing, choose field task, and the task should be from the current item. So from here, and then choose the name. Finally, you could even map the task status if you wish to. So here, just select new, because every single time you add this task, when this thing runs, technically those tasks are at that point new and need to be actioned. So at this point, let's generate a preview, run tests, and you can see how the records are created. So now let's name this generate tasks based on deal status, and this is preset, and turn this on. Let's go back to our data and let's check this out. So now that we're back here in our deals, let's run this. So I'm gonna choose pre-sale, and we have two unnamed tasks. This is very normal. We need to address the leftmost field. So in this case, what I want to do is, again, just like we did with deals, just like we did here, I want to formulate the creation of the name of that task. So again, name, formula. Now, you see how I'm moving from formula to this field over here? I'm pressing tab on my keyboard, and that tabs through until this field gets highlighted. So that's a nifty little trick. So formula, tab, 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 tab. There we go. I can now press enter, and concatenate gets pre-filled. So now I want to say task, then comma, then I'm gonna open up my quotes again, and I'm going to press space and then add a pipe symbol and then another space. I'm gonna add another comma to signify that I want to add another field. I'm gonna add the task status, enter, and I'm gonna close concatenate function there. Press save, confirm change. And now this instantly gives me tasks. How cool is that? So let's see this in action one more time. I'm just gonna delete these records and deal. I'm gonna clear my deal status and choose pre-sale, and that should add all the tasks. So that's it for this very, very short video. Hope you've gained something from this. There's going to be a continuation of this particular video, so make sure you check out part 2. Leave your comments and concerns down below, and I'll try and address as much as I can in the comments down below. And yeah, I'll see you in part 2. Thanks.